My guest today is Joe Jacobson, one of only a few current British Jewish professional footballers. Until very recently, Joe served as the captain for the Wycombe Wanderers, where he played for 10 years and made 400 appearances. He was also the former under-21 captain for Wales and the first Jewish player to score a goal in a professional game at Wembley in 53 years. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. I didn't know that stat about Wembley, so that's nice to hear.
Yeah, there you go. And telling you things about yourself you didn't even know. Uh, thank you very much for joining us. Massively appreciate it. I mean, first off, let me just ask you, how does it feel to be leaving Wycombe after 10 years?
Sad, really. You spend so long somewhere and kind of become part of the family. You spend so much time with staff and with players and coaches. You become so close with people, and to say goodbye, the last game of the season was an emotional day. It's not still quite sunk in because after every season you kind of say goodbye to everyone, but know that you're going to see them in a couple of months. So I think when pre-season starts and I'm not there as a player, then I think it's going to kind of sink in that actually no, I've left. And yeah, depending on what I do going forward, yeah, if it's to be the end of my playing career and that finished at Wycombe, then great. And if I'm going to play somewhere else, then I kind of start all over again and meet a load of new people and go from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, let me ask you, how did you get into football professionally? Because I think a lot of people grow up enjoying it, and there's a fantasy of like I'm going to be a footballer when I grow up. You actually did it, so how did that happen?
Probably the same as every other kid. Just grew up in a football obsessed household. My dad was football obsessed. My brother was the same. My mum grew up as a Spurs fan as well. So she was sporty. She's into other sports as well. So it was just a case of being involved in football from a really early age. And it's probably when I was, I don't know, 5 or 6, where I started to remember thinking that I was better than everyone my age and was able to compete really with my brother, who's a couple of years older than me, and his friends. And I played for a local team at about 6 or 7 years old, and Cardiff asked me to join their centre of excellence at 9, I think it was, and kind of just went along, trained. They kept me there. You were on kind of like a youth contract at the time, and just progressed throughout the age groups until 16, when I was doing my GCSEs, leaving school, and they offered me a scholarship, or a YTS it was called back then, to go full time after I left school, and that was it. Just kind of progressed and progressed, and next you know, I'm in the first team and being offered a professional contract. So you kind of just get caught up in it. It wasn't kind of like a big moment. My journey was quite smooth all the way through. There's a lot of players who will sign somewhere, get released, will leave, will move on, and mine was kind of a lot smoother. So I was quite lucky with that.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty cool story. And what else is cool is that you are one of the only current British Jewish professional footballers. Is that something you think about ever? I mean, what's that like for you?
Um, Over time, when I first made my debut, there was a lot of interest about it because I was the first British Jew to play for 25 years. I think Barry Silverman was the one previous to me. So
Wow.
um, at the time, I didn't really know that. You're a kid, you just think that it shouldn't matter where you're from or your religion or anything like that, and I didn't quite understand why at the time. Still to this day, people ask me all the time, why is there not more? And it's really difficult to kind of pinpoint an answer on that. Whether it's because a lot of the Jewish kids, they all play in like a Jewish league in London, most of them, so it's really difficult for them to kind of branch out, and us scouts going to watch these games. I'm not sure. I don't know what the level's like, but there's definitely some good kids about because there's starting to be a few more in the game now at academy level. Um, so it wasn't until that case, and then obviously throughout my career, people ask questions. People have always kind of taken an interest because that's a little bit different to other people, and I come across a lot of players in my time, and a lot of them had never, or they say they never met a Jewish person before. I'm sure they have. They just didn't know about it. So yeah, it's been quite fun answering questions and educating a few people along the way, and up until what happened in October, I hadn't really had too much to talk about over my career, but but since then it's kind of blown up like everything else has. And yeah, I've had a lot more questions and kind of interviews and things like that since then.
Yeah, so that kind of all happened at once, didn't it? I mean, so after the Hamas terrorist attacks on the 7th of October, you put out a post on Twitter or X denouncing the people that you saw in London and other places like Sydney that were celebrating them, and you wrote, "Imagine taking to the streets and celebrating mass murder." And then, as a result of this one post, you received some nasty messages, and so did Wycombe, so did the club, including the demand that you apologise and that Wycombe remove you as captain, which I'm glad to see they did not do that. It then got to the point where plainclothes security was present to escort you to the stadium. Can you tell us what happened here and how this has impacted you? Because that's quite shocking.
Yeah. So first of all, with the original tweet, like you said, I saw kind of how people were reacting around the world after it happened, which was, it blew my mind that there's a huge terrorist attack and people were kind of, the first time I've ever seen in my life, people celebrating what had happened, and it was crazy. I couldn't quite work it out. So I remember speaking to the guys at the club, and you know, we have a media department who sometimes, if we're posting on social media, they may contact you and say, just be careful about what you say. So I remember being in dialogue with them and kind of saying what I wanted to say, and showed it, and they said, look, it's fine, you're not kind of going against anyone or being hurtful to anyone by what I'm saying. And I had one or two comments at the time about it, nothing too sinister. And then about a month later, there was I started getting a lot of messages on social media for people having a go at me, you know, linking what I've said to genocide, and all these buzzwords kind of came out on my social media. And um, I didn't know what it was from, and then I found out that there was a peaceful protest in Wycombe. You know, there's been protests around the country, around the world, and you know, some I agree with, some I don't with, but that was irrelevant. It was just that people then saw my post on X and were relating that to a protest that happened a month later, even though you can clearly see there's a date on my post, and that went through like a Wycombe Facebook group, which has 40,000 members in it, and people then started linking the two, started sending me some not very nice messages. The club, obviously, like you said, received letters from certain individuals and groups, and I was called into a meeting with the club, and you know, with the safety officer, with the one of the guys who's head of business operations, and a few guys like that, and we were going through it and what was said, and the club were like, look, you've done nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong. And we had a local imam from the community, and he was saying the same. He was saying, look, I know you haven't done anything wrong, but I can see why people are kind of taking it the wrong way. And I was like, well, I can't, there's nothing to link the two together. And that's not my fault if someone wants to take something that happened in the past and link it to now. If you did that, then the whole world would be a mess, even more than it is. So at that time, one of the letters stated that if this doesn't happen, the club doesn't take action, or Joe doesn't apologise, then we're going to barricade the gates at Adams Park, our stadium. Known to me, I was travelling to a game, and we always go from the training ground to the stadium. It's only a 5-minute drive, so we had pre-match before a game at the training ground, and one of the players asked to kind of asked for a lift with me, which I thought was quite strange because that never happened before. Anyway, I drove with him, and as we got to the stadium, he had a phone call from one of the guys who works at the ground, and was like, "Where are you? Are you with Joe?" And I could hear this conversation going on, and I was a bit like, "What?" You know, I didn't put two and two together at the time. And then I got on my car, and you know, I see people's families and the car park, and I want to say hello. I'm, you know, giving people hugs, whatever. And then all of a sudden, two or three other guys from the club kind of grabbed me and was like, "Right, Joe, come on, let's go into the stadium now." And I thought, this is all a bit strange. And it wasn't until after the game where I realised that they'd made the player travel with me. They made the guys come out to meet me at my car. They'd there was also plainclothes police, not plainclothes police, plainclothes security that the club had hired just around the place, just in case something happened. Look, nothing happened. There was no one there, but just in case that had happened. And I was like, well, this is mental. You know, why am I getting targeted for something that I was just kind of going against the actions of a terrorist attack, which is mind blowing. So I remember speaking to my dad on the way home, and he was like, "Yeah, we were in conversation, but we didn't want to tell you before the game." So it was something that I didn't know about until afterwards. And since then, I don't think there has been. The one of the things I wanted to make clear was I did a piece with Sky News a month or two ago, and we were sitting down about it, and that story kind of got blown up a little bit more. I think there was a news report on Talk TV then saying I've got 24/7 police protection, and it blew up, and I was like, no, it wasn't that way, you know, but there was still had to be something put in place just in case, you know, if someone makes a threat towards you, you have to take it seriously, and unfortunately, that's kind of what it was. And since then, look, I've not had anything personal. I've had messages every time I post. There'll be something underneath it, you know, relating to the situation out there, and it's not something I've ever commented on. You know, being Jewish, you go to Hader, you're brought up kind of being taught this since I was 5 years old about the history of Israel and stuff, and even still, I don't know, you know, all the ins and outs, and a lot of it goes over my head, and I'm not one to comment on history that's thousands and thousands of years old. So for these people to kind of attack me on that, I was disappointed and upset about it. And every time now that the football club post about me, it was my testimonial year, so there's been loads of posts about, you know, an evening with me and my 400th match and stuff. You look through the comments, and there's always a couple of comments from you know, anti-Israel or pro-Palestine, whichever way around it is, and targeting me, which, you know, I've still not commented on the situation. So for those people to go out their way to do that, I think, you know, is a really sad situation at the minute. And also, doing the interviews I've done, I know I'm putting myself out there to, you know, to suffer some sort of abuse. That's just, rightly or wrongly, that's the nature of it right now, and the situation. I'll do a thing with Sky, and you know, there's hundreds of posts back to me saying things about me and my beliefs, that not that anyone knows my beliefs because I've never spoken about it, but because of me being Jewish, I'm getting a lot of stick. That's the bottom line from it, and you know, that shouldn't happen.
No, it shouldn't. And one thing I am heartened to hear is that it sounds like the club has been very supportive. They signed off on the tweet before it went out, and then, as you said, after it happened, they said you've done nothing wrong. So it sounds like you've had a lot of good support from Wycombe, which is really nice to hear.
Yeah, the club have been brilliant. Not just with that, but I remember a couple of weeks after the attack, it must have been the start of November, because I remember talking about Halloween, and there was a threat against Jewish people on Halloween, and anyone who's got a mezuzah on their door. And I remember I sat down with the owner of the football club, and an American guy who's not Jewish, and you know, at Wycombe we've got a club that's really inclusive, and everyone can be who they want to be. We had an Irish player who didn't want to stand with the rest of the team because of his beliefs in Ireland, about the war, and you know, we supported him because that's his family beliefs, and you know, who are we to say what he should have done? You know, we don't know what his family have been through and stuff. So my owner sat down with us, and we did a video on the club's socials, on the website, and just to kind of say that, you know, it's not okay what's going on in the world right now, and how Jewish people, because there was an attack in Israel and a retaliation, as there has been, that Jewish people now around the world are suffering because of that. And it was great. I mean, we had loads and loads of great feedback. Yes, we had some not so great feedback as well from, you know, mostly trolls online, and that was expected. But for them to kind of stand with me and give me a platform to kind of speak about it, I thought was amazing from them, and you know, something I'll always be thankful for.
Yeah, that's really really good. Um, Now I want to ask you before this post, before this incident, had you ever experienced any sort of anti-Semitism or discrimination directed at you in this way? Is it something that you were sort of aware of, but maybe hadn't come into contact with? I'd like to hear about that.
Not really, and whenever I've spoken about, you know, anti-Semitism stuff in the past, I've kind of, in a way, felt not a bit of a fraud, but I hadn't really experienced too much of it, which is great, you know. But I think in football as well, where it can be a brutal kind of environment, and we've seen what players have suffered, you know, the England players with the racism they suffered after missing penalties and stuff. And I think, is it because people don't know that I'm Jewish, and you know, there's nothing distinctive about me that screams that I'm Jewish. I don't have a sign on my head or anything like that. So um, I'd had, I wouldn't say casual anti-Semitism throughout the years, and look, there's a lot of stuff that gets said in the changing room, and it's between friends. So I never thought it was anti-Semitism. People like to stereotype, and I've had to kind of educate people along the way. The only incident I kind of had was I was speaking to an ex-teammate, or he was a teammate at the time actually. He's now an ex-teammate, and when everything came out about Wiley and his posts. I remember one of my teammates kind of liking a lot of the posts because I went to have a look at what was going on, and I saw they were liked by teammates. So I questioned him on it, and his response was, "I like people who kind of speak out." I was like, "Speaking out's fine, but you can't incite hate. You know, you can't want that." And we had a lot of conversation, a lot of dialogue, and the more and deeper the conversation was going, the more I realised the stereotypes that he was kind of spouting and trying to explain to me, it was it was a lack of education because he couldn't understand what he was doing and what he was saying was wrong. And in the end, I had to kind of end the conversation because there was just no kind of breakthrough, and that was the disappointing thing for me was that I'm trying to have a conversation, educate you why you can't say certain things and why certain things are offensive towards me, and he couldn't quite understand that, and I think that was the most disappointing thing is I've had these conversations. I had one recently actually with a player, and he mentioned something, and I said, "Well, actually, look, you can't really say that because of this, and this." And he was like, "Look, I'm sorry, like I don't know, but please, like educate me more and explain more." And I was like, "Great, like this is all it takes. If everyone in the world had this attitude, then there'd be no problems anywhere." So um, the one player I've done work with Kick It Out. I've been an ambassador for Kick Out on a players board, and I'm in constant dialogue with them, and I did show the messages to because it was all through messages this incident I had, and I did show them that, and again with them, there isn't any Jewish representatives on who work for Kick Out. They come to me if there's ever something that happens in football. They'll come to me and say, "Is it okay if we post this?" or "What does that mean for you?" Like, so I'm kind of going to them for advice, but they're coming back to me for it. So nothing ever got done, and I didn't want anything to happen. I didn't want to the player to get in trouble or anything like that. But it was just the sad thing for me was that lack of kind of education, because I just feel that any other kind of discrimination gets clamped down way more seriously than anti-Semitism does.
It's really disappointing when you are trying to educate and explain something to someone and you realize that the ignorance just runs so deep. It's going to take a while. I mean, well done for trying your best to educate him, and it's also very heartening to hear that in the other case that you mentioned, there are people who are willing to learn and want to learn and that sort of thing. And I think basically as long as you are well, not just you, but anyone is trying to educate the people around them, then that's essentially the main thing. There's only so much you can do. It's on other people to be receptive as well. Um, you know, you mentioned anti-Semitism in football and that sort of thing. Let's talk about the Football Association. They were criticised last year for not lighting up the Wembley Arch in the colours of the Israeli flag, the England versus Australia match directly following the Hamas attacks on the 7th of October. But they've lit it up for other attacks. They did it and incidents. They did it for attacks on Paris and Ukraine and that sort of thing. What did you make of this at the time?
Same as everyone else. Just why not? And for someone to resign from their job because of it shows a lot. It was why is it all of a sudden now, when it's against Jews, that it doesn't matter anymore, and you're careful and you're overthinking things. So a friend of mine, Dean Furman, who's had a long football career as well, he works for the PFA, and we were chatting, and we actually organised a meeting with the PFA, the head of the ED&I from the FA and from the EFL, and we met with them, me, Dean, and Scott Kashket, who's another Jewish player who plays for Sutton, and we were asking these questions, why and how it made us feel, and look, they only apologised and wanted us to kind of go further with that, and look, I was the captain of Wycombe Wanderers when we got to the playoff final, not long after the Russia attacks on Ukraine, and I stood on the halfway line before the match holding the Ukraine flag. So the FA was more than happy to, just think there's been an attack, let's support. Yet 2 years later, when the attack happens again, there isn't any support, and they want to think a lot deeper into it, and they don't want to upset anyone. And as a Jewish person, not just in football, I was so disappointed, but to be in football as well, where football has the biggest platform I keep saying this, football has the biggest platform for me out of anything in the world. Nothing reaches bigger globally than professional football, and for the FA and for Wembley Stadium to have made a stance that day in support would have been huge, and they refused to do it. And look, they subsequently apologised. Since then, they're trying to do good. They've set up a task force. We had a Hanukkah party at Wembley Stadium in December that for the first time they put on, which was great. And I sat on a panel that evening. And so they are trying. I think they've realised they've made a mistake and want to kind of now, change that, educate that, and show support to not Israel, but to Jewish people who felt let down by them.
Yeah, I do think a lot of people at the time felt, as you say, let down, felt abandoned. But it's good that they have apologized and are. It sounds like they're trying to make amends. I want to ask you about the task force in a bit. But before, I do want to say about the Arch. After after this incident, the FA announced that there would be a new policy, and that new policy would be to no longer light up the Arch over after any terrorist attacks going forward. What do you think about that? Do you think that was the right move?
It's difficult because I think they set the precedent themselves. So why is it that this is the straw that broke the camel's back? Why is it that it took an incident against Jewish people to change their views on it? Like I said just now, I think it can do amazing things and show amazing support. And it's disappointing because wherever it is around the world, there's terrorist attacks that go on all over the world a lot of the time, and some get brushed under the carpet, some you don't see a lot because of the media. So it's a difficult one. For me personally, I think for the start, when it first did it was probably a bad idea, because there probably should have been some sort of dialogue to say, look, if there's this happens or this happens or this happens, it may be a sticky situation, so let's not do that. But once you start doing it, I think you have to continue. And I think then the first time that you stop doing it, then you're going to get more backlash than ever before. And for them to stop doing it because it's against Jewish people and Israel, I think that's what's upset so many people. So look, it's a difficult one, and would they have then lit it up, for instance, now for what's going on in Gaza? I don't know. There's I'm glad I'm not involved in those conversations, but for me, I think once you I think once you've done it previously, I think they should have done. I think they should have lit it up, and then maybe in a period where there was, something where they can just kind of come out of nowhere and say, well, from now on, actually, Wembley isn't being used for this. It's, the arches can be used for something else, and stop it then, rather than wait till everyone goes, well, are you going to light it for this attack? And they come out and say no. They could have done it a lot better, I think.
Mm. Let me ask you about the task force. In December of last year, the FA set up the Antisemitism task force, which you alluded to, which you are a part of. Can you tell us more about the task force and what it hopes to achieve?
Well, I think the ultimate goal is to eradicate anti-Semitism from football. A lot of it is to educate educate people in grassroots, because I was at a meeting at London Lions, and I'd never heard kind of the abuse that they had suffered. I wanted to go along because of the situation with the under-12 team, I think it was, where opposition players refused to, or opposition parents of players refused to let their kids play. So I wanted to go down and show my support. I'd never heard the kind of the levels of abuse that these kids had suffered, and it wasn't just the kids. It was they had a just a sign of who had suffered anti-Semitism from playing for London Lions, and 90% of the room put their hands up, and I was like dumbfounded by it. So the FA want to eradicate anti-Semitism from grassroots. They're putting a handbook together as well. I think that's in conjunction with the PFA. I'm not quite sure on that, but starting to do one now. We have one about faith in football that gets sent round to all the football clubs, just to kind of show awareness to other players for a start of if, for instance, if it's Ramadan and one of your teammates isn't eating, then just to kind of show support and how the club can help. So they're doing another one for Judaism as well, that we are in the process of helping with that. Other things they are doing is training for staff as well, to get staff to understand and be educated on in the workplace, and also then in the stadiums at Wembley, if they hear things, if they're also doing things with flags, with offensive flags. So there's a few things that's going on. We've actually got a meeting at Wembley. The second meeting, I was unavailable for the first meeting, but I've seen the minutes from it, and we've got a second meeting in the next couple of weeks at Wembley as well, that I'll be there and seeing how it's progressing. But little things like the Hanukkah party was a great event that the chairman of the FA was there, and the chief rabbi, and myself, Dean. We spoke with others, and it was nice to kind of have the FA realising that they kind of made a mistake a little bit with the arch, and now showing, well, actually, no, we are there for you, and we can help going forward.
That's really, really good, and it sounds very positive, so that's good to hear. I want to touch on something that you mentioned a moment ago. You were hearing of incidents of anti-Semitism during football games. There's a lot of this going around, and we hear a lot of this. There have been reports, for example, of supporters performing hissing sounds in reference to Nazi gas chambers. This is usually done to target supporters of Tottenham Hotspur, which has traditionally had a large Jewish fan base. Why do you think this is still such an issue in football?
I think football's got that tribalism that nothing else kind of matches with, especially, well, not just in England, but all around the world. And I've been a football fan my whole life, and football fans are desperate to get one over on opposition fans. With Spurs, especially, I'm a Spurs fan. With Spurs, especially, I think the easiest thing that people do is try to target them. What are they, known for, of being a Jewish club, and how can we get at them? Let's do hissing noises, or speak about yids and things like that. And I also believe that Spurs singing the Y words. I'm actually involved in doing a video shortly about trying to not stop the Y word, but kind of move on from it now, from what it stands for. So yeah, I think things like this need to be eradicated 100%. And if there was, we see all the time that there's chanting in Liverpool and Man United games about disasters that have happened, about Hillsborough, about Munich, and it's a huge things made of it all the time, and rightly so. This can't happen, and you don't hear as much as it when it's about hissing noises or about Jewish and Spurs, and it's normally coming from Chelsea or West Ham fans. They're normally the and it's not everyone, by the way. I'm not putting it on them, but the instances that have happened tend to be in those games. And again, this is where the FA needs to educate stewards on other staff, that if they hear anything like that or they see any abusive language, then you have to pull them up and give them the authority to do that. I think it's just that educating of staff and stewards, and it's difficult for stewards because you're one steward maybe and 100 people, and if there's a big group, you've got to be very brave and courageous to be able to kind of go to a lot of riled up, angry football fans and tell them to refrain from using certain language. So I get it's really difficult for them, but there needs to be more in place, and the technology now, you can see, fans, every club knows what fan sits in what seat. So if there's people filming, if stewards don't want to point it out during the game, there's easy ways of CCTV picking out people and banning people, because it happens. We all know it happens, and so why aren't more and more people getting banned or not just being banned, but being educated in things that they can and cannot say at a football match?
Mm. There's likely a lot of Jewish football fans who are experiencing or witnessing anti-Semitism either at games or online, maybe in forums or stuff like that, and they're not sure what to do about it. What advice might you give them?
Look, I get, it's really difficult to speak out during a football match. Like I said, if there's some fans saying certain things and there's a group of them and you're by yourself, it's really difficult to kind of speak out and confront people, and I get that's not easy. And if there's a way of speaking to a steward or a police officer at a game, then that can help. Or there's Kick It Out, have an app where you can log in and record an incident. I've done it personally. I was at a Spurs Chelsea game in the away end at Stamford Bridge, and I heard a Spurs fan using racist remarks towards a Chelsea player. And look, I looked at this person and thought, you're obviously intoxicated in some sort of way, and I didn't want to kind of confront them, but I went on the app and I reported it. I kind of knew roughly what seat he was in, and I don't know what happens from there. It doesn't tell you. It just says, thank you for reporting the incident, and that's it. So there is ways of doing it. But just to kind of speak out, and like I said, the more that you can, and this doesn't have to be Jewish people either. Like, the people know within reason what anti-Semitism is, or racism, or any other discrimination. So they're happy to point that out, and I think it's just making sure you do, and kind of the more and more people do that, then the less and less we should see it happening, and there needs to be more. Sky Sports do a fantastic job about mentioning about racism weekends we have in the Premier League and things like that, and it's amazing, and it gains great traction. So, is there something that the Premier League or the FA can do to help with anti-Semitism? I think in the future there will be. I think there needs to be, because it's not spoken about enough.
Joe, let me ask you a question that I ask all of our guests, which is, if someone who's not Jewish comes to you and says that they want to help in the fight against anti-Semitism, where should they start?
Wow, good question. First of all, for a Jewish person, someone who's not Jewish, to come and say that means more, and it's so much more powerful than a Jewish person saying it. I think just showing that support, first and foremost, to anyone who's Jewish, to when you just calling things out when you see it, I think is huge. I think whatever walk of life you're in, whatever work it is, if you can kind of start to educate people and ask questions and ask the company you work for, or if you work in school or hospital, whatever it is, if you can go to that company and say, look, I want to create some sort of anti-discrimination task force, start with that. Then I think you can start to educate, and I think the education is the biggest thing. Because, like I said, I've been taught it since I was 5 years old, and I still don't know, much about the history and what's going on and why it all started from and stuff. So, but I do know anti-Semitism, and I do know a lot of what you can and cannot say. So, ask questions, show support, and kind of, talk about it with your friends, that anti-Semitism should be in the same category as every other discrimination, and it should all be talked about the same, really.
Yeah. Joe, before we wrap up, please tell the listeners, what have you got going on? What have you got coming up? And where can people find you?
So I've left Wycombe. I'm at a bit of a crossroads at the minute of what to do next. Being 37, I don't have a long football career ahead of me. So at the minute, I'm just kind of weighing up all my options. I've got options to play. I'm really interested in going on the business side of football, so I've got a few things in that kind of area not lined up, but hopefully I can go into something like that. I've been doing some media work with Sky throughout the playoffs, and hope to do some more stuff of that. So at the minute, I'm enjoying my time off. I've got, if I was to go back into football, I've got another kind of 6 weeks off where I'm going to spend some time with my wife, go on holiday, and hopefully I can do more things like this. I want to be a beacon for people to look up to regarding anti-Semitism. I've kind of put myself in that kind of position at the minute, and I want to speak out more and more. And I feel, as a Jewish footballer, I have a platform that I have to use now. I've had times where I felt a bit, not nervous, but a bit unaware of kind of the role I play in it. But I'm happy to speak out. I'm open for the criticism, and hopefully you can see me kind of campaigning more against anti-Semitism.
That's awesome. I look forward to it. I think that everyone will look forward to that.
Thank you very
Joe
much.
Jacobson, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Against Antisemitism.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.